The coffee cup slipped from Amara Okoye's trembling fingers and shattered against the elementary school classroom floor on Valentine's Day. And in that terrible moment of searing pain behind her eyes, the kind that felt like her skull was splitting open from the inside, her 10-year-old daughter, Sage, looked up from the construction paper hearts she'd been cutting and knew with absolute certainty that something was catastrophically wrong with her mother. Amara had been laughing just seconds before. She'd been standing at the craft table helping a student named Marcus glue googly eyes onto his Valentine's card robot, her rich, warm laugh filling the room the way it always did when she volunteered at Emerald Heights Elementary. She was beautiful in that effortless way that made other mothers both envious and drawn to her. 36 years old with glowing dark brown skin, natural hair styled in elegant twisted locks pulled back from her face, wearing jeans and a vibrant African print blouse that hugged curves that belonged on an Afrobeat music video rather than a Seattle elementary school classroom. She looked young, vibrant, alive. She looked like someone who had everything under control, like someone who'd spent 10 years building a successful architecture career while raising triplets alone and making it look easy, even when it wasn't. But then the headache hit. Amara's hand went to her temple, her eyes squeezed shut, and the coffee cup she'd been holding, the one that said "World's Best Mom" that the triplets had given her last Mother's Day, fell in what felt like slow motion. The sound of ceramic shattering against linoleum cut through the cheerful Valentine's Day chaos of 23 third graders making cards and eating heart-shaped cookies, and suddenly every eye in the room was on her. "Miss Okoye?" The classroom teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, started toward her. Are you all right?" "I'm fine," through gritted teeth, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes, one hand still pressed to her temple. "Just a headache. I'm fine." But Sage knew her mother's lies. At 10 years old, Sage had become an expert in reading her mother's face, in knowing when "I'm fine" meant "I'm terrified, but I'm trying to protect you." Sage set down her scissors and stood up from her chair at the craft table, her dark brown eyes, so like her mother's, but also somehow different in a way that made strangers do double takes, fixed on Amara with laser focus. Beside her, her siblings Luna and Phoenix had also stopped what they were doing, their triplet radar pinging with shared alarm. "Mom," Sage's voice cut through the classroom noise with the quiet authority of someone who'd appointed herself the responsible one years ago. "You're not fine. Your face is doing the thing." "What thing?" Amara managed, still pressing her fingers against her temple. "The thing where you're trying not to cry in public," Luna said matter-of-factly from the other side of the table, not looking up from the watercolor card she was painting for their mother, a sunset over the ocean with 3 tiny figures standing on the shore. Luna painted the way other kids breathed, constantly, desperately, like the world would fall apart if she stopped. "Baby, I'm okay, just..." Amara took a step toward the door, toward the bathroom, toward anywhere she could hide until this passed, but her legs weren't working right. The room tilted sideways. The fluorescent lights became too bright, stabbing into her brain like knives made of pure white fire. She could hear her own heartbeat thundering in her ears, drowning out the sounds of concerned children and Mrs. Rodriguez calling her name, and then the floor was rushing up to meet her, and everything went dark. Sage was moving before her mother hit the ground. Later, she wouldn't remember the decision to run, wouldn't remember pushing past Marcus and his robot Valentine, wouldn't remember the scream that tore out of her throat. "Mom!" in a voice so raw and terrified it made every adult in the room freeze where they stood. She only remembered being suddenly there, on her knees, beside her mother's unconscious body on the cold linoleum, her small hands shaking so badly she could barely hold Amara's face between them. Mama, wake up!" Sage's voice cracked open like the coffee cup. "Mama, please wake up. I'm right here. We're all right here." Nothing. Amara's face was slack, peaceful almost, like she'd simply fallen asleep in the middle of the room. But this wasn't sleep. Sage knew it wasn't sleep the way she knew the sky was blue and that 2 + 2 was 4, and that her mother had never once in her life fallen asleep standing up in a classroom full of children. Luna arrived beside her on her knees so fast she skittered across the linoleum, tears already streaming down her round, expressive face. "Sage, why won't she open her eyes? Why won't she open her eyes? I keep telling her to open them and she won't."
Luna's voice was climbing toward hysteria, and Sage grabbed her sister's hand and squeezed hard. Luna, look at me. Sage's voice shook, but she held it together because one of them had to. She's breathing. I can see her breathing, okay? She's breathing. Phoenix hadn't moved from the craft table. He was standing perfectly still, his face completely white beneath his brown skin, staring at their mother with an expression that nobody who knew him would recognize, because Phoenix never looked scared. Phoenix was the one who solved problems. Phoenix was the one who figured things out. But right now, Phoenix looked like someone had just pulled the ground out from underneath him, and he hadn't hit the bottom yet. Phoenix? Sage's voice cut through whatever was happening inside his head. Phoenix, I need you.
He blinked. Something clicked behind his eyes, the same click that happened when a computer finished loading, and he moved. Mrs. Rodriguez, he said, and his voice was flat and steady in a way that sounded wrong coming out of a 10-year-old's mouth. Please call 911, now. My mom is unconscious and she's not responding. Mrs. Rodriguez was already on the phone, pressing it to her ear with a hand that trembled, her other hand waving frantically at another teacher to come help. The classroom had descended into chaos. Kids were crying. Some were laughing because they didn't understand what was happening. Marcus had knocked over his robot, trying to see what was going on, and the googly eyes were scattered across the floor like tiny white marbles. The paramedics arrived in a blur of blue uniforms and urgent voices and equipment bags that clinked and rattled. They moved Amara onto a stretcher with practiced efficiency, checking her pulse, shining a light in her eyes, attaching monitors that beeped and beeped and beeped. The triplets stood in a tight cluster, watching, and Sage felt like she'd swallowed a stone that was sitting in the bottom of her stomach and wouldn't go down. Is she going to be okay? Sage asked the female paramedic, a black woman with kind eyes and box braids pulled back into a tight bun. Her voice came out steadier than she expected. Tell me honestly, is my mom going to be okay? The paramedic knelt down so they were eye to eye. Sweetheart, we're going to do everything we can for her. That's my promise to you, okay? That's not a yes, Phoenix said quietly beside her. The paramedic looked at him, surprised, and then something in her expression softened in a way that made Sage want to cry all over again. No, the woman admitted gently, it's not. But it's not a no either. It means we're fighting for her. We're really, really fighting. Can we come with her? Luna asked, clutching Sage's arm. Please, we can't just stand here. We can't just watch her go without us. Please, please, please.
The paramedics exchanged a look, one of those wordless conversations that adults had with their eyes. The female one nodded. All right, you three, climb in, but you sit, you buckle, and you let us work. Deal? Deal. All three said at once. They climbed into the ambulance and sat on the narrow bench seat, and as the doors slammed shut and the vehicle lurched forward with lights flashing and siren wailing, the world outside disappeared, and it was just the three of them and their mother and the machines that were keeping her alive. Luna grabbed Sage's hand on one side and Phoenix's hand on the other, and the three of them held on to each other with a grip that said more than words ever could. For a few minutes, no one spoke. The paramedics worked in focused silence, adjusting things, checking things, doing things that the triplets didn't understand. Luna was crying quietly, tears slipping down her cheeks one after another, but she didn't make a sound. Phoenix was staring at the monitors with the kind of intensity he usually reserved for computer screens, trying to read the numbers, trying to understand. And Sage sat in the middle, the oldest by 3 minutes, the one who was supposed to have answers, and felt completely and utterly lost. She's going to be okay, Luna whispered, squeezing both their hands. She has to be, because we haven't finished making her Valentine's card yet. I haven't even painted the waves. Despite everything, despite the fear that was sitting so heavy in Sage's chest she could barely breathe, she almost smiled. That was Luna. Even now, even in the middle of the worst afternoon of their lives, Luna was thinking about a painting. The male paramedic glanced over at them while he checked something on one of the monitors. His expression was kind, careful, the way adults looked at kids when they were trying to figure out how much truth they could handle. Hey, you three, does your mom have an emergency contact? Someone we should try to reach? A dad? A grandparent? An aunt? Anyone?
The question landed in the middle of the ambulance like a pebble dropped into still water, and the ripples spread in all directions. Sage opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. There was no dad. There had never been a dad, not one they knew about anyway. Their mother had never dated, not once, not ever, not in 10 years of Sage watching and noticing and wondering. Every time they asked about their father, Amara would get this look on her face. Not angry, not sad exactly, but something in between, something complicated and heavy. And she would say, "That's a story for when you're older, babies. Right now, it's just us, and we're enough. We're more than enough." And they were. They had always been enough. Amara, Sage, Luna, and Phoenix against the world, and the world had never stood a chance. "Our grandma," Sage said. "She's in Nigeria, visiting family. She won't be back for 2 weeks." "Anyone else? A family friend? A neighbor?" "Mom's best friend Cassandra is in Portland, business trip. She won't have her phone on until tomorrow morning." The paramedic nodded slowly. "Okay, we'll need to figure something out when we get to the hospital. In the meantime," he hesitated, choosing his next words carefully, "is there anyone at all your mom might have listed? Even someone she hasn't spoken to in a while? Sometimes people keep old contacts for emergencies." Sage thought about this. Her mother's phone was in her purse, which was... where? Still at the school? She looked around the ambulance and spotted it, the worn leather bag that Amara carried everywhere, tucked on the bench beside her unconscious body. The sight of it, so ordinary, so normal, so very much a part of everyday life, made something crack inside Sage's chest. "Can I check? Her phone. Can I look at her contacts?" The paramedic nodded and handed her the purple-cased phone. Sage held it up to her mother's face for Face ID, and the screen unlocked with a soft click, and she felt Luna lean over her shoulder to look and Phoenix shift closer on her other side. The contacts list opened. Sage scrolled slowly, scanning past familiar names: Cassandra, Grandma Oya, the dentist, the school, work colleagues whose names she recognized from birthday party guest lists, and none of them felt right. None of them felt like the kind of person you called when the world was ending at 2:47 on a Valentine's afternoon. And then she saw it. A single name, near the top of the list where it clearly sat as a favorite, with a small red heart emoji glowing beside it like a tiny flame. J. Hart. Sage stared at it. She had never in her entire 10 years of life seen this name on her mother's phone. She had never heard her mother say it. And yet here it was, right there at the top, with a heart. A heart. Her mother didn't put hearts next to anyone's name, not even Grandma Oya. "Who's Jay?" Luna breathed, reading over Sage's shoulder. "Mom never talks about anyone named Jay." Sage tapped on the contact, and the screen showed her the call history. A long, empty stretch of nothing. And then, at the very bottom, 2 entries dated exactly 11 years ago, the last outgoing call, and below it, a text message sent by Amara that read, "I'm sorry, please don't look for me." The 3 triplets read it in silence. "The 11 years, Sage said, very quietly. "That's before us." He stopped, doing the math that he always did, faster than anyone else in any room. "Mom was pregnant with us when she sent that message." "She kept his number, though," Luna said, and there was something wondering in her voice beneath the tears. "She kept it this whole time. 11 years, and she never deleted it." Sage looked at the heart emoji again, at the message that said, "Please don't look for me." At the 11 years of silence and distance that existed between that text and this moment. Her mother had run away from this person, had asked him to stop searching, and then had kept his number, with a heart, for over a decade, tucked away like a secret, like something precious she wasn't ready to let go of, even though she'd walked away from it. Mom would never keep a number she didn't care about, Sage said slowly, thinking out loud the way she always did when she was working through a problem. She deletes everything. She's obsessed with her phone being organized, but this one she kept. "So he matters," Luna whispered. "He really matters." "Call it," the female paramedic said gently. She'd been listening, Sage realized, watching them put the pieces together with an expression that was both impressed and heartbroken. "If your mom kept that number for 11 years, sweetheart, then there's a reason. Let's find out what it is." Sage looked at her siblings. Luna nodded immediately, wiping her face with the back of her hand. Phoenix hesitated for exactly 1 second, the time it took him to run whatever calculation he ran before making decisions, and then nodded too. Sage pressed call. The phone rang. Once.
twice. Each ring felt like it lasted an hour. Sage's heart was beating so hard she could feel it at her fingertips, in her temples, in the tips of her ears. 3 rings. What if this number was disconnected? What if this was an old phone? What if... Hello? The voice was male. Deep. Warm in a way that surprised her, like she'd expected something cold or indifferent and gotten something else entirely. There was a slight accent underneath it. Not heavy, just a gentle softening of certain sounds that suggested English wasn't the first language in his household growing up.
Sage opened her mouth to speak, and nothing came out. Her throat had closed. She looked at Luna, who squeezed her hand and whispered, "You can do it. You're Sage. You're the brave one." Sage swallowed hard and tried again. "Hi, is this Jay?" "Yes," the voice said. "Who is this?" "My name is Sage." She gripped the phone tighter. Okay, I don't really know how to explain this, so I'm just gonna say it, okay? My mom is in an ambulance right now. She collapsed at my school. She's unconscious and the paramedics can't wake her up, and we needed to call someone, and your number was in her phone, and she took a shaky breath, and it had a heart next to it, so I called. Silence, but not the silence of someone who had hung up or wasn't listening. This was a different kind of silence. The kind that happened when someone had just been hit by something they weren't expecting and needed a moment to breathe. "A heart," the voice repeated, very softly. "Yeah," Sage sniffled. She hadn't realized she'd started crying. "A little red one, next to your name. And the last time she texted you was 11 years ago. She said, 'I'm sorry, please don't look for me.' But she never deleted you. So," her voice wobbled, "so I thought maybe you'd want to know that she's hurt and that we need help." Another beat of silence, and when the voice came back, something had shifted in it. Something had cracked open just slightly, just enough for Sage to hear it. A rawness, an emotion that sounded too big for words. "Sage," the man said, and the way he said her name was so gentle it made her chest ache. "I need you to listen to me very carefully, okay? What is your mother's full name?" "Amara," Sage said. "Amara Okoye."
The silence that followed was the loudest thing Sage had ever heard. When he spoke again, his voice was different, still gentle, still warm, but underneath it was something fierce and desperate, the voice of someone who had just been given something they'd been searching for a very, very long time. "Sage, I'm coming. I'm coming right now. Can you tell me where you are? Which hospital?" "Harborview Medical Center," Phoenix supplied, leaning close to the phone. "In Seattle. We should be there in about 4 minutes." Okay. She could hear movement on his end now. Quick footsteps, a door, the muffled sound of someone saying something urgent in the background. "I'm in Seattle too. I'll be there as fast as I possibly can. Can you..." He paused. "Can you stay on the line? Just for a little while. I don't want you 3 to be alone." Sage blinked. She hadn't expected that. She'd expected him to hang up so he could drive, or to ask practical questions, or to sound confused and annoyed at receiving a panicked phone call from a stranger's child on a random Tuesday afternoon. She hadn't expected him to ask to stay on the line so they wouldn't be scared. "Okay," she said in a very small voice. "Yeah, okay." "Good." His voice settled into something calmer, steadier, like he was deliberately slowing himself down for them. "So, Sage, tell me about your mom. What's she like?" The question was so unexpected that, for a moment, none of them said anything. Then Luna, who was still pressed against Sage's side with tears on her face, leaned toward the phone and said, "She's the best mom in the whole entire world." "Yeah?" The warmth in his voice was unmistakable now, thick and genuine. "Tell me more. What makes her the best?" "She makes the best pancakes," Luna said immediately, the words tumbling out like they'd been waiting for someone to ask. "Not regular pancakes. She puts blueberries in them and draws little animals on the plate with the syrup, and she sings in the kitchen when she thinks nobody's listening, but we always listen, and she's really bad, but we love it anyway. She helps me with my code at night," Phoenix said, quieter than usual, like he was offering something private. "Even when she's tired from work. She always says she doesn't understand computers, but she actually understands more than she thinks. And she reads to us," Sage said, "every night, even though we're 10, and it's kind of embarrassing. She does all the voices. She's really good at the villain voices. She sounds incredible."
the man said, and his voice sounded thick in a way that made Sage think he might be crying too. She sounds really, really incredible. She is, Sage said firmly, so you need to hurry, because she needs to be okay. She has so much more pancake making and voice doing to do. A sound came through the phone, a wet laugh, the kind that happened when someone was laughing and crying at the same time. I'm hurrying as fast as I can. And Sage, yeah, you were incredibly brave to make this call. All three of you were. Your mom would be so proud.
Sage pressed her lips together hard to keep from crying any more than she already was, and Luna squeezed her hand, and Phoenix put his head on her shoulder, and the ambulance carried them toward the hospital with the phone still connected, the voice of a stranger keeping them company on the scariest ride of their lives. The ambulance doors burst open at Harborview Medical Center, and suddenly everything was controlled chaos. The stretcher rolling out, nurses converging with clipboards, doctors being paged, and the triplets being gently but firmly guided away from their mother by a kind-faced woman in scrubs who promised they would get updates as soon as there were any to give. They ended up in a waiting room that smelled like antiseptic and stale coffee, sitting in hard plastic chairs that were uncomfortable in a way that felt deliberate, like the hospital wanted to make sure nobody got too comfortable here. Luna sat in the middle this time, curled up with her knees drawn to her chest, staring at nothing with red-rimmed eyes. Phoenix had his phone out and was typing rapidly, searching for something. Brain aneurysms, probably, or survival rates, or something that would let him feel like he was doing something useful instead of just sitting here waiting. And Sage sat on Luna's other side, her hands folded in her lap, watching the double doors that led to wherever they had taken their mother, and waiting. 20 minutes passed, then 30. The waiting room had other people in it. A woman holding an ice pack to her wrist, an old man reading a magazine like nothing was wrong, a teenage boy asleep in a chair with his mouth open. Life going on for everyone else, while the world held its breath for the Okoye triplets. It was Luna who saw him first.
She was staring blankly at the double doors, not really seeing anything, when they swung open and a man walked through. And something in Luna's artist's eye, the part that noticed things other people missed, the part that saw color and composition and light in places nobody else looked, registered him before her conscious mind caught up. She sat up straighter, her eyes narrowed. She turned to look at Phoenix, then back at the man, then at Phoenix again. She whispered, "What? Sage, look at him. Look at him and then look at Phoenix." Sage looked. The man was tall, impossibly tall, the kind of height that made a waiting room feel smaller, and he was moving through it with a focused intensity that made people unconsciously shift out of his way. He wore an expensive charcoal suit, and his face was the kind of beautiful that made you stare without meaning to. Sharp angles, high cheekbones, a jaw that looked like it had been sculpted rather than grown. But it was his hair that was truly arresting. Long, glossy black hair that fell well past his shoulders, with the top portion swept back and tied in a neat ponytail at his crown, while the rest cascaded freely, catching the fluorescent light in a way that shouldn't have been possible in a hospital waiting room. He was scanning the room with dark, intense eyes that were Sage's breath caught. She looked at Phoenix, she looked back at the man, she looked at Phoenix again. Phoenix's eyes, the exact same shade, the exact same shape, the exact same way they narrowed slightly when they were focused on something important. "Oh my God," Sage breathed. The man's gaze found them. For one suspended moment, he just looked at them. 3 children sitting by to side in plastic chairs, all with his eyes looking back at him, and something crossed his face that Sage had never seen on an adult before. It was like watching someone get hit by lightning and survive, like watching someone find something they'd lost so long ago they'd forgotten what it looked like.
He crossed the waiting room in 4 long strides and dropped to one knee in front of him, and up close, the resemblance was impossible to ignore. Not just the eyes, the cheekbones, the way his mouth curved at the corners, the slight tilt of his head when he was looking at something that mattered. "Sage?" His voice was barely above a whisper, and it was shaking. "I'm Jay Song. You called me."
Luna was staring at him with wide eyes, her artist's mind working furiously, comparing and cataloging and connecting. She reached out, slowly, almost without realizing she was doing it, and touched his cheek with her fingertips, turning his face slightly toward Phoenix so she could look at them side by side. "Sage," Luna whispered again, and now her voice was trembling with something that wasn't just fear. "He has Phoenix's face." Phoenix looked up from his phone, looked at the man, looked at Sage, looked back at the man. His analytical mind did what it always did, processed the data, ran the variables, arrived at a conclusion. "We look like him," Phoenix said, very quietly. The waiting room went silent, or at least it felt silent, the way the world goes quiet when something enormous is about to happen. Jae-sung was still kneeling in front of them, his hands resting on his knees, and Sage could see that they were shaking. His whole body was shaking, actually, a fine tremor running through him that he was clearly trying to control and failing. Luna was the one who asked. Of course she was. Luna, who felt things first and deepest, who understood emotions the way Phoenix understood numbers. She leaned forward in her chair and looked at this beautiful, trembling stranger with the same eyes as her brother and asked, in the softest, most hopeful voice Sage had ever heard from her, "Are you our daddy?"
The sound Jae-sung made was barely audible, a small, broken intake of breath, like someone had pressed a hand against the wound that had never fully healed. His eyes filled with tears, and he didn't look away from Luna, didn't blink, didn't do anything, except nod once, slowly, like the movement cost him everything he had. "Yes," he said, his voice cracked clean in half. Yes, I think I am." "You think?" Sage asked, because even now, even in this moment, she needed to understand. She needed the facts. She needed it to make sense. "How can you not know?" "Because your mother left 11 years ago," Jae-sung said, and he wiped his face with the back of his hand in a gesture that was so human, so raw, that it made Sage's heart hurt to watch. "And she never told me about you. I didn't know you existed until you called me on that phone." "Mom doesn't talk about it, Dad," Phoenix said slowly, processing. "She never talks about anyone." I know she doesn't, and I'm sorry. I'm sorry for so many things. But right now," he took a breath that seemed to come from very deep inside him, steadied himself and looked at all three of them with an expression that was fierce and tender and terrified all at once. "Right now, the only thing that matters is your mom. The doctors are working on her, and I'm not going anywhere. I promise you, I'm not going anywhere." "You promise?" Luna asked, and her bottom lip was trembling. "I promise," Jae-sung said, "on my life." A nurse appeared at the edge of the waiting room, clipboard in hand, and called for the family of Amara Okoye. Jae-sung stood and turned toward her, and the nurse's eyebrows rose slightly at the sight of this tall, striking man in an expensive suit, but she recovered quickly. "Are you the family?" "I am," Jae-sung said, and there was no hesitation this time. "These are my children. What's happening with their mother?"
The nurse led him a few steps away from the triplets to talk, and Sage watched his face as he listened. She watched the way the color drained from it, slowly, like someone had opened a tap somewhere. She watched his jaw tighten, watched his hands close into fists at his sides, watched him ask questions in a voice that was very controlled and very quiet, the kind of quiet that was more frightening than shouting. When he came back, he sat down in the chair beside them, and for a moment he just sat there, staring at his hands. Then he seemed to notice the triplets watching him with 3 pairs of identical worried eyes, and something shifted in his expression. The fear was still there. Sage could see it, hiding underneath, but he pushed it down, buried it somewhere deep, and when he looked up, his face was calm. "Okay," he said gently, "here's what's happening. Your mom needs surgery. The doctors are going to operate on her brain, and they're very, very good at what they do. This hospital is one of the best in the country, and the surgeon who's going to take care of her is one of the best surgeons in the world. Is it going to work?" Phoenix asked, because Phoenix always asked the direct question, the one nobody else wanted to say out loud. "Yes," Jae-sung said, without missing a beat, "it's going to work. Your mom is strong. She's one of the strongest people I've ever known. And the doctors are going to fix what's wrong, and she's going to wake up, and everything is going to be okay. He said it with such quiet conviction that even Sage, who had spent 10 years learning to read lies, believed him. Or maybe she just needed to believe him. Maybe that was the same thing.
Luna leaned sideways and rested her head against Jae-sung's arm. It was such a small, instinctive gesture, the kind of thing kids did with people they felt safe around, and Jae-sung went completely still for a second, like he'd been startled by something miraculous. Then, very gently, he put his arm around her shoulders and pulled her closer. "How long does the surgery take?" Sage asked, because someone had to ask the practical questions, and that was her job. "A while," Jae-sung said. "Long enough that you three should probably eat something. Are you hungry?" "No," all three said simultaneously. "Okay, but I'm going to get you food anyway because your mom would want you to eat, and I have a feeling she'd be very annoyed with me if I let her kids go hungry on her account." Phoenix almost smiled at that. Almost. "Come on," Jae-sung said, standing up and offering his hand to Luna, who took it without hesitation. "Let's find somewhere comfortable to wait, and while we're waiting..." He looked at all of them, and his eyes were still a little red, but his smile was real. "You can tell me everything about your mom. I want to hear it all." They followed him out of the waiting room, this stranger with their eyes and their mother's heart emoji next to his name, and none of them thought to question it. None of them thought about the fact that an hour ago he hadn't existed in their world, and now he was the only solid ground beneath their feet. Some things, it turned out, didn't need 11 years to feel like home. Jae-sung came back with sandwiches wrapped in plastic and bottled water, and a look on his face like he wasn't entirely sure he hadn't hallucinated the last 2 hours. He handed out the food carefully, like a man who had never done this before and was terrified of getting it wrong. The triplets picked at it. Nobody was really hungry, but nobody wanted to put it down either, because holding something in their hands felt better than holding nothing.
"So," Jae-sung said, settling into the plastic chair beside Sage. He clasped his hands together, then unclasped them, and then didn't seem to know what to do with them at all. "Tell me something. Anything. I don't even know where to start." "Mom says you shouldn't start in the middle," Luna offered helpfully. "She says that when she tells us bedtime stories. She says you have to start at the beginning, or nobody knows what's happening." "Smart woman," Jae-sung said, quietly. "The beginning of what, though?" Phoenix asked, not looking up from his phone. He was still researching, still gathering data, still trying to protect them all with information, because that was the only weapon he knew how to use. "The beginning of you," Jae-sung said. "What are you guys into? What do you do for fun? What's the worst thing that ever happened at school?" There was a pause. The triplets glanced at each other. One of those silent conversations they'd been having since before they could talk. The kind where entire arguments and agreements happened in the space of a blink. Luna broke first. She always broke first. "Phoenix once built a robot at school that was supposed to hand out Valentines," she said, a smile sneaking onto her face, despite everything. "And it malfunctioned and started throwing them at everyone's heads instead." "It was a calibration error," Phoenix said stiffly, but the tips of his ears had gone red. "Mrs. Henderson had to duck Phoenix. She's 62. It barely grazed her. She filed an incident report, Phoenix. An overreaction." Jae-sung was laughing, a real laugh, surprised out of him, and the sound of it changed something in the waiting room. It made the fluorescent lights feel less harsh. It made the plastic chairs feel less hard. Luna noticed the laugh and filed it away, the way she filed away colors and textures and the exact quality of light at different times of day. "What about you?" Jae-sung asked Sage.
Sage shrugged one shoulder, trying to look casual, but the corner of her mouth twitched. "I made a business plan last year for a lemonade stand with a PowerPoint presentation and everything. Mom helped me make slides. It had charts," Phoenix added, and there was something almost proud in his voice, color-coded ones. "And it worked," Luna said. "She made $63 in one weekend." "67, Sage corrected automatically. There was a tip jar. Jae-sung looked at Sage with an expression that was half amazement and half something deeper, something that ached. Your mom helped you make a PowerPoint presentation? She's good at that stuff, Sage said, matter of fact. She's good at everything, actually. She just pretends she isn't. She pretends a lot of things, Phoenix said, and then immediately looked like he wished he hadn't. The silence that followed was the kind that had weight to it. Jae-song didn't press. He just nodded, slowly, like he understood more than Phoenix had meant to say. Luna pulled her knees up to her chest and rested her chin on them, watching Jae-song with those big, observant eyes of hers. "You're nervous," she said. "A little," Jae-song admitted. "You don't have to be," Luna said it simply, like it was a fact, like it was the sky being blue. "We already like you." "Luna," Sage started, a warning in her voice. "What? It's true. He stayed on the phone with us. He came running. He bought us food even though we're not eating it." Luna shrugged. "That's what good people do." Jae-song pressed his lips together hard, and Sage saw his eyes go bright again, saw him swallow something down that threatened to come back up. "Thank you," he said, and his voice was rough. "That means more than you know."
The hours crawled past after that. The cafeteria closed. The waiting room emptied and filled again with different strangers carrying their own fears. Jae-song answered every question the triplets threw at him about his work, his company, the places he'd traveled, the weird things that happened in tech meetings. He showed them photos on his phone. Luna asked him to describe the colors of the sunset in Tokyo and listened with her eyes half closed, painting it in her mind. Phoenix peppered him with technical questions about AI that made Jae-song's eyebrows rise in genuine surprise. Sage sat beside him and said less than her siblings, but she watched everything, cataloged everything. The way she cataloged everything. Phoenix was the first to fall asleep. One minute he was mid-sentence, asking about quantum computing, and the next his head had dropped sideways onto Jae-song's shoulder like a puppet whose strings had been cut. Jae-song went completely still, the same way he'd gone still when Luna touched his cheek in the waiting room, and then, very carefully, adjusted his arm so Phoenix's head was resting more comfortably. Luna fell asleep 20 minutes later, curled sideways in her chair with her head in Sage's lap, one hand still loosely gripping her sister's sleeve, like she was afraid of losing her in the dark. Sage held out the longest. She always held out the longest. But eventually, around 11, the exhaustion became too heavy to fight, and she let her head tip sideways until it found Jae-song's other shoulder. And the last thing she felt before sleep took her was his hand coming to rest gently on top of her head, warm and steady and careful, and his voice, barely a whisper, "I've got you. All three of you. I've got you." The morning came in gray and cold, the way Seattle mornings did in February. Sage woke to someone's hand on her shoulder, and for one disoriented second, she didn't know where she was. Then the smell hit her. Antiseptic, recycled air, the particular staleness of a place that never closed, and everything came rushing back.
Dr. Torres was standing in front of them, clipboard in hand, face professionally calm. Jae-song was already awake, already on his feet, already shifting Phoenix and Luna gently so they wouldn't topple when he moved. If you're still watching and you need to know what happens next, hit that like button so I know you're here with me. Drop a comment and tell me what you think is going to happen. Now let's see what the doctor says. "The surgery was successful," Dr. Torres said, and Sage felt something unlock inside her chest that she hadn't realized was clenched. "We repaired the aneurysm and stopped the bleeding, but I want to be honest with you. The next 72 hours are critical. We've induced a medical coma to let the brain rest and heal. She won't wake up for at least 2 days, maybe longer, and when she does, we'll need to run tests before we know the full picture. But she's alive," Sage said. "She's alive," Dr. Torres confirmed. "She fought hard. She's stable. She's in the ICU, and you can see her, a few minutes at a time, 2 visitors max." Jae-song looked at the triplets. "You 3 go first. I'll be right here when you come out." They followed a nurse through corridors that all looked the same until they didn't, and then they were in the ICU, and Amara was there, smaller than Sage had ever seen her, wrapped in bandages, surrounded by machines that beeped and hummed and breathed for her. Not asleep, not awake, somewhere in between, in a place the living couldn't reach. Luna took her hand first, held it against her cheek.
Mom, we're okay. We're safe. There's this man. He's kind of your ex, I think, or maybe more than your ex. We're not sure yet. And he's been really nice to us, and he cried when he saw you. And we think you should probably wake up because this is going to be a really interesting conversation.
Sage almost laughed. She leaned down and pressed her lips to her mother's forehead. "Just come back to us," she said. "That's all you have to do. Come back." Phoenix didn't say anything. He just stood at the foot of the bed and held the railing and looked at his mother with an expression that no 10-year-old should ever have to wear. And when the nurse said time was up, he was the last one to let go. Jae-sung went in alone after them. Sage didn't watch through the window. Some things were private, even between people who were just beginning to know each other. But when he came out, his eyes were red and his hands were shaking, and he didn't say a word about what had happened inside. He just looked at the triplets and said, "Let's go get you packed up. You're staying with me." "You want us to stay with you?" Sage asked. "I want you somewhere safe and warm and taken care of," Jae-sung said. "And right now, that's with me. Unless you'd rather—" "No," Luna said quickly. "We want to stay with you, right?" Sage looked at Phoenix. Phoenix looked at Sage. Something passed between them. One of those triplet conversations that took no words. And then Sage nodded. "Yeah," she said. "Okay, let's go." The townhouse in Capitol Hill looked exactly the way they'd left it, and somehow that felt wrong. The Valentine's craft supplies were still spread across the kitchen table. Luna's half-finished painting was still on the easel by the window. Phoenix's latest robotics project was still scattered across the living room floor in careful labeled piles. Everything was exactly the same, and nothing was the same at all. Jae-sung walked through the space slowly, taking it in. The school photos on the walls, Amara's architectural drawings, framed and beautiful, a single shelf of books in the hallway, novels and textbooks and children's books, and tucked in the corner, one small framed photograph that Sage watched him find.
It was the only photo of Amara that didn't include the triplets. She was younger in it, maybe 25, standing on a rooftop somewhere with wind in her hair, laughing at something outside the frame. Behind her, out of focus but unmistakably there, was a man with long, dark hair. Jae-sung picked it up, held it for a long time, put it back exactly where it had been. "Let's pack," he said, and his voice was very quiet. 2 weeks passed. The triplets lived in Jae-sung's penthouse, all glass and space and views of Seattle that made Luna gasp every morning, and visited their mother every single day. They watched her breathing monitors and held her hands and talked to her about school and homework and the terrible joke Phoenix had told at dinner. They told her about Jae-sung, about the penthouse, about how Phoenix had already found 3 things wrong with the home security system and fixed them without being asked. On day 7, Amara opened her eyes. Phoenix was the one reading to her, a statistics textbook, because he genuinely believed the dry monotone of population variance data might wake her up. He was mid-sentence when her fingers twitched around his, and he stopped, waited, barely breathed. Her eyes opened, confused, lost, blinking against the light. "Mom?" Phoenix's voice cracked in a way it hadn't since he was 7. "Mom, can you hear me?" "Babies," Amara whispered. Just the one word, but it was enough. They called the others in. Sage and Luna arrived at a run, and then all 3 of them were there, crowded around the bed, holding her hands, crying and laughing at the same time because she was awake and she was alive and she knew them and everything was going to be okay. "Mom said," Sage said, wiping her face, "there's something we have to tell you."
Amara's gaze drifted to the door, and Sage followed it. And there was Jae-sung, standing in the doorway with a paper cup of coffee he'd clearly forgotten he was holding, staring at Amara like he'd seen a ghost. The coffee cup tilted. Sage watched it happen in slow motion, the lid shifting, the liquid sloshing, and lunged forward to catch it, but Jae-sung recovered first, grabbing it with one hand and steadying it. Neither of them noticed. They were looking at each other. Amara's heart monitor beeped faster. Once, twice, 3 times. Sage saw her mother's face go through something complicated and raw. Shock, yes, but underneath that, something older and deeper and more painful. Something that had been buried for 11 years and had just been dug up without warning. "No," Amara breathed. Her voice was barely there, scraped raw from the coma in the surgery in the weeks of silence. "No,
You can't be here. How are you here?" "Mom called him," Luna said quickly, stepping forward, putting herself between her mother and the door like a small, fierce shield. "We called him because you were unconscious and we needed someone, and his number was in your phone, with a heart." Amara's eyes went to Luna, then to the door, then back to Luna. Something in her expression shifted, not softer exactly, but searching, trying to understand how the thing she had run farthest from had somehow found its way back to her. "It's okay," Sage said, squeezing her mother's hand. "He's been really good to us, Mom. He took care of us. He stayed up with us all night at the hospital, and he drove us to school, and he—" "Stop." Amara's voice was quiet but firm, and something in it made all three kids go still. She turned her gaze back to Jae-sung, who hadn't moved from the doorway, who was standing there with his hands at his sides and his face completely open in a way that looked like it was costing him everything he had.
"We need to talk," Amara said to him. Not coldly, not warmly. In the flat, controlled voice of someone who was holding something enormous in place with sheer force of will and didn't have the energy to pretend otherwise. But not now, not here, not in front of them. Jae-sung nodded once. "Whenever you're ready," he said, "I'll be here." He turned and disappeared down the corridor, and the space he left behind felt suddenly, painfully empty. Amara looked at her children, her brave, impossible, beautiful children, and pulled them close with the one arm that wasn't connected to an IV. "I love you," she said. "All three of you, more than anything in this world. Do you understand that?" "We know, Mom," Sage said. "We know," Luna echoed. Phoenix said nothing. He just held her hand tighter. Amara came home 3 weeks after the surgery. She moved slowly, tired easily, needed help with things she'd never needed help with before. Jae-sung had already arranged for a nurse during the day, already stocked the townhouse with groceries, already fixed the wobbly step on the porch that Amara had been meaning to get to for months. He moved into the guest room like it was the most natural thing in the world, and Amara let him, because the triplets needed him there, and she was too exhausted to fight it. But she didn't talk to him, not really, not about anything that mattered. They occupied the same house like two people on opposite sides of a glass wall, polite, careful, aware of each other at all times, but never quite touching. She thanked him for meals. He asked about her physical therapy. They discussed the triplets' schedules in calm, efficient tones, and underneath all of it, a silence stretched and pulled like something alive, like something waiting to snap.
The triplets felt it. They felt it the way you felt a storm coming, the pressure in the air, the way everything went too quiet. They watched their mother flinch every time Jae-sung entered a room. They watched Jae-sung look at Amara when she wasn't watching with an expression so heavy with guilt it was almost unbearable to see. And they started talking about it. "She won't even look at him," Luna said one night, cross-legged on Phoenix's bed with her sketchbook open. She was drawing Jae-sung the way she'd seen him in the waiting room, kneeling, hands shaking, eyes full of tears, like he's something that hurt her. "He did hurt her," Phoenix said from his desk chair, not looking up from his laptop. "Something happened 11 years ago, something bad enough that she ran across the entire country and changed her name and hid us from him." "But he's nice," Luna insisted. "He's really nice. He stayed up all night with us. He cried when he saw Mom." "Being nice now doesn't mean he wasn't terrible then," Sage said from the doorway, arms crossed. She'd been listening. She was always listening. "Mom's not going to just forgive someone because he brings groceries." "So what do we do?" Luna asked. Sage looked at her siblings, Phoenix with his analytical mind, Luna with her emotional intelligence, and herself with her ability to make a plan out of thin air. And something clicked into place. "We figure out what actually happened," Sage said, "and then we help them fix it." Operation Parent Trap, she thought. But not yet. First, they needed the truth. The truth, as it turned out, was worse than any of them had imagined. It came in pieces, the way these things always did, not all at once, not in one dramatic conversation, but in fragments overheard and questions carefully asked and silences that said more than words ever could. Phoenix was the one who put most of it together, because Phoenix was the one who paid attention to details that other people missed.
He found the letter first, It was tucked into a drawer in Amara's bedroom, an old envelope yellowed at the edges with a name written on the front in handwriting that wasn't his mother's. He almost didn't open it, but he did, because he was 10 and curious and terrified that his mother might die, and he needed to understand why she had looked at Jae-sung the way she had. The letter was from someone named Elena. It was a confession. Phoenix read it twice. Then he sat on the edge of his mother's bed for a very long time, staring at nothing, turning the pieces over in his mind until they clicked into a picture he didn't want to see but couldn't unsee. He told his sisters that night, in the quiet of their shared room, with the door closed and the lights off and their voices barely above whispers. 11 years ago, Phoenix said, Mom and Jae-sung were engaged. They were happy. And then there was that woman named Elena who worked with him, and she wanted him. Wanted him how? Luna asked. Wanted him for herself. Phoenix's voice was careful, precise. So she set him up. She arranged for Mom to go to a restaurant, told her Jae-sung would be there, that it was a surprise dinner. But when Mom got there, he stopped. What? Sage pressed. Elena was there with him, at the table, close, laughing, her hand on his. Phoenix swallowed. Mom walked in and saw it, and she thought he was cheating on her, with Elena. She thought the engagement, the wedding plans, all of it was a lie. The silence that followed was the kind that changed things, the kind that couldn't be taken back. But it wasn't real, Luna whispered. Was it? No. Phoenix's voice was very small. Elena staged the whole thing. She told Jae-sung to meet her there for a business meeting. She knew Mom would show up. She planned it so Mom would see exactly what she wanted her to see.
And Mom just laughed? Sage asked. She didn't ask him? She didn't give him a chance to explain? She was pregnant, Sage. Phoenix said it quietly, like he understood now, really understood why their mother had done what she did. She was 2 months pregnant, and she walked into a restaurant and saw the man she was about to marry laughing with another woman. And everything she was most afraid of, that she wasn't enough, that he'd chosen someone else, that the life she'd been building was built on nothing. All of it became real in 1 second. What was she supposed to do? Sit down and ask for an explanation? Nobody answered, because they all knew. They all knew what their mother would have done. Amara Okoye did not ask for explanations. Amara Okoye survived. That was what she did. She cut away the things that threatened to destroy her, and she kept moving, kept breathing, kept going for her children, for herself, for the stubborn, fierce, burning need to still be standing when the dust cleared. She saw him with another woman, Luna repeated, very quietly. And she left, and she had us, and she never told him. And he's been looking for her for 11 years, trying to explain, trying to apologize, and she's been running. The three of them sat in the dark for a long time after that, thinking about their mother, alone, pregnant, heartbroken, walking away from the man she loved because one moment in a restaurant had shattered everything she thought she knew. Thinking about Jae-sung, searching for 11 years, carrying guilt he didn't deserve for something he never did. They're both idiots, Sage said finally. Yeah, Phoenix agreed. But they loved each other, Luna added, and her voice was sad and hopeful at the same time. They really loved each other. So we helped them remember that, Sage said, sitting up straighter in the dark. And even though no one could see her face, her siblings could hear the plan forming behind her words, could feel the shift in the air that meant Sage had found a problem and was about to solve it.
Operation Parent Trap, she thought. Phase 1, the truth. Phase 2, everything after. Operation Parent Trap officially began on a Tuesday night, 3 weeks after Amara came home from the hospital, in Phoenix's bedroom with the door locked and the lights on, and a whiteboard that Sage had stolen from the garage. Okay, Sage said, uncapping a blue marker with her teeth and standing in front of the whiteboard like she was about to present a quarterly earnings report. Here's what we know. Mom and Dad were in love. Something broke them apart. Now they live in the same house and won't look at each other for more than 3 seconds. We need to fix it. Wait, Luna was sitting cross-legged on Phoenix's bed, hugging a pillow. Before we make any plans, Phoenix, you need to explain something. Phoenix looked up from his laptop, where he'd been typing with the focused intensity he brought to everything.
Last night, Luna said carefully, you told us the whole story about Elena and the restaurant and everything. How did you know all that? Mom never told us. Dad never told us. So how did you know? Phoenix closed his laptop slowly. He glanced at Sage, who nodded. Go ahead, tell her. And then he reached into the pocket of his hoodie and pulled out a folded envelope, old and yellowed at the edges, with a name written across the fringe in handwriting none of them recognized. I found this, he said, handing it to Luna, in Mom's bedroom, in the drawer under her underwear, which, yes, I know, gross, but I was looking for her passport because I thought maybe we'd need it for the hospital paperwork, and I wasn't exactly thinking straight. Luna unfolded the letter carefully, like it might crumble. Sage moved to read over her shoulder. It's from Elena, the woman who set up Dad. It's a confession. She wrote it, he checked, about 9 years ago. Mom must have found it somehow, or Elena sent it to her. It's all in there. The fake dinner, the staged photos, everything Elena did to make Mom think Dad was cheating.
Luna read in silence, her eyes moving across the page. When she finished, she looked up at Phoenix with an expression that was part horror, part heartbreak. Mom has had this for 9 years, she said. She knows Elena lied. She knows Dad didn't cheat. So why hasn't she forgiven him? Sage asked, taking the letter and reading it herself, scanning the lines with the efficiency she brought to everything. Because knowing something in your head and believing it in your heart are two different things, Phoenix said quietly. Mom saw Dad with another woman with her own eyes. A piece of paper doesn't erase that image. She needs to feel safe before she can let it go. Sage looked at her brother. Sometimes Phoenix surprised her, not with his intelligence, which she'd long since stopped being surprised by, but with the moments when he said something that showed he understood people just as well as he understood computers, even if he pretended otherwise. Okay, Sage said, turning back to the whiteboard and writing in big blue letters, make Mom feel safe. So that's our mission, not just getting them together, making Mom actually believe it's real, making her believe she won't get hurt again. How do we do that? Luna asked. Sage tapped the marker against her chin. Small steps. We create situations where they have to be close, where they have to talk, where Dad has to show Mom over and over that he's not going anywhere. And we do it in a way that feels natural, not forced. So, like a plan? Phoenix said. A very detailed plan, Sage corrected, and began to write. The first scheme was the coffee.
It happened the next morning, and it was Luna's idea, which meant it was executed with zero subtlety and maximum emotional manipulation. She woke up before everyone else, unusual for Luna, who normally had to be dragged from bed like a hibernating bear, and made an entire pot of coffee, a massive pot, the kind of pot that required both parents to share the kitchen at the same time to pour their cups, because there was only one mug that didn't have chips in it, and that mug belonged to Amara. Morning, babies, Amara said, shuffling into the kitchen in her robe, still moving carefully because of the balance issues from the surgery. She stopped when she saw Jae-song already at the counter, pouring coffee into the chipped mug because it was the only one available. Oh, she said. Sorry, I can wait. No, here. Jae-song immediately offered the mug, holding it out toward her, and their fingers touched in the handoff, and neither of them moved away for a full 2 seconds before Amara pulled back and said, "Thank you," in that careful, neutral voice she used around him. Luna, hiding behind the doorframe with Sage and Phoenix, mouthed, "Phase 1 complete." "Mom, this girl made a lot of coffee," Phoenix observed loudly from behind them, completely ruining the subtlety, but Sage elbowed him hard enough to make him yelp, and the moment was preserved. The movie night scheme came 4 days later, and it was Sage's masterpiece. Family movie night, Sage announced at dinner, setting a printed agenda on the table like they were in a board meeting. Mandatory attendance. Everyone on the couch. I've selected the movie, I've made the popcorn schedule, and I've arranged the seating. Seating? Jae-song raised an eyebrow. Sage produced a diagram. It was color-coded. It showed the couch from a top-down view, with labeled positions for each family member. Amara and Jae-song were in the middle. The triplets were on the outside edges. "This is the optimal configuration for communal viewing," Sage said with a straight face. "I did the math." "You did the math on seating arrangements," Amara repeated, a smile threatening the corner of her mouth despite herself. Obviously.
The movie Sage had chosen was not technically romantic.
It was an animated film about a family of penguins who got separated by a storm and had to find their way back to each other. But the metaphor was so heavy-handed that even Phoenix rolled his eyes during the opening credits. It worked anyway. The couch was narrow, the blankets were thick and heavy, Sage had specifically chosen the biggest ones, and by 30 minutes in, the warmth and the dark and the quiet had done their work. Luna fell asleep first, her head dropping onto Sage's shoulder. Phoenix lasted another 10 minutes before his head tipped sideways onto Jae-sung's arm, and Amara, who had been sitting perfectly upright at the beginning of the movie with a careful 6 inches of space between herself and Jae-sung, slowly, imperceptibly listed sideways as the warmth pulled her under. Her head came to rest against his shoulder. Jae-sung didn't move, didn't breathe almost. He just sat there, very still, very careful, like he was holding something infinitely precious, and was terrified that if he shifted even an inch, it would break. Sage, who was the only one still awake, watched this happen from the other end of the couch. She watched her mother's face soften in sleep, all the tension she carried during waking hours finally releasing. She watched Jae-sung's hand hover for a moment above Amara's arm before settling there, feather light, barely touching. Sage smiled in the dark and made a note on her mental chart. Progress. The fake school project was Phoenix's contribution, and it was brilliant. "We have a homework assignment," Phoenix announced the following week, spreading papers across the kitchen table with an expression of such carefully constructed innocence that Sage almost laughed out loud. "It's about family history. Both parents have to participate. It's worth 50% of our grade." "Both parents?" Amara looked up from her laptop. "Both parents," Phoenix confirmed. "Mrs. Henderson was very specific. She said—" She consulted a paper that was in fact completely blank except for Phoenix's own handwriting, disguised to look like a teacher's. She said, "We need to interview both parents about how they met and what our family means to them, together, at the same time, so we can compare notes." Amara and Jae-sung exchanged the glance. The first real glance they'd shared in weeks. Not careful, not guarded, but something almost amused, like they both suspected they were being played and couldn't quite figure out how. "All right," Amara said slowly. "I suppose we can do that." They sat at the kitchen table together that evening, the triplets across from them with notebooks and pencils, and for the first time since Amara had come home, they talked. Really talked. Not about schedules or logistics or who was picking up whom from where, but about themselves, about how they'd met at a tech conference 11 years ago, about the first time they'd laughed together, about small moments that neither of them had ever told anyone.
Dad,
Luna interrupted at one point, her pencil poised over her notebook.
what's your favorite memory of Mom?
The question landed softly, like a stone dropped into still water. Jae-sung looked at Amara, and Amara looked at her hands, and for a moment the glass wall between them flickered. "The first time she laughed at one of my jokes," Jae-sung said quietly. "I'd been trying for 20 minutes and everything I said was terrible. And then I said something completely stupid and she just—" He smiled, the kind of smile that hurt to look at. "She laughed so hard she snorted, and I knew, right then, that I was in trouble." Amara's lips pressed together. She didn't look up, but her hand, resting on the table, moved an inch closer to his. Luna caught it. She kicked Sage under the table. Sage kicked Phoenix. Phoenix didn't react because Phoenix was already writing furiously in his notebook, but his ears had gone pink. The schemes were working. Slowly, painfully slowly, but working. And then Elena Park walked back into their lives.
It happened on a Wednesday afternoon, 3 weeks into Operation Parent Trap, and it almost ruined everything. Phoenix saw her first. He was walking home from school with Sage and Luna, backpacks bouncing, mid-argument about whether a hot dog was a sandwich. Luna said yes. Phoenix said the question was philosophically meaningless. Sage said she didn't care, but someone needed to pick a side, when a black BMW pulled up to the curb beside them and the window rolled down. The woman inside was beautiful in the way that magazine covers were beautiful, sharp and polished and carefully assembled. Blonde hair that fell in perfect waves, red lipstick, a smile that was too wide and too bright and didn't reach her eyes. "Excuse me," the woman said, leaning out the window. "I'm looking for Yu Jae-sung's residence. Do you know where he lives?" Phoenix stopped walking. Something cold and sharp moved through him.
Not fear exactly, but recognition. He'd seen this face before. He'd spent an entire night last week going through every photo, every article, every social media profile connected to Elena Park, memorizing her face the way he memorized code. He knew exactly what she looked like. He knew exactly who she was. "Phoenix?" Sage said, noticing he'd stopped. "What's wrong?" Phoenix didn't answer. He grabbed both his sister's arms and pulled them sideways, around the corner of a building, out of the woman's line of sight. "That's her," he whispered. "That's who?" Luna asked. Elena Park, the woman from the letter." Luna's face went white. Sage's went hard. "She's here," Phoenix said, and his voice was very calm in the way it got when the situation was serious. "She's looking for Dad, and if she finds him, if she gets close to Mom again, she'll do it again," Sage finished. "She'll try to break them up again." They looked at each other in the narrow space between two buildings, 3 10-year-olds with matching dark eyes and a shared fury that made them look older than they were. "Not this time," Sage said.
Phoenix had already been researching Elena for days, ever since he'd found the letter, ever since the truth had come out. He knew things. He knew that Elena had tried to reach Jae-sung multiple times over the years, that she'd sent emails and messages that he'd never responded to. He knew that she'd seen a local news article about Amara's collapse, a small piece buried in the Harbor View Medical Center community newsletter that mentioned a local architect treated for a brain aneurysm on Valentine's Day. He knew that Elena had connected the dots, had figured out that Jae-sung was back in contact with Amara and had come to Seattle to do what she'd done 11 years ago. "Stop it." "Okay," Sage said, pulling out her phone and opening the Notes app. "Emergency planning session. Luna, text Dad that we're coming home late. Tell him we're at the library. Phoenix, find out exactly where Elena is staying. I need to think." "Think about what?" Luna asked. Sage's eyes had gone sharp and bright in a way that Phoenix recognized. It was the same look she got before a business plan, the same look she got before she solved a problem that everyone else had given up on. "About how 3 10-year-olds are going to take down a grown woman," Sage said, "without anyone getting in trouble." The planning session happened that night, after the adults had gone to bed, in Phoenix's room, with the door locked and the whiteboard back out. Sage stood at the front like a general. Luna sat on the bed with her sketchbook, already drawing. Phoenix was on his laptop, pulling up everything he'd found on Elena.
"Here's what we know," Sage said, writing in red this time. "Elena is in Seattle. She wants to get close to Dad, and if she does, if Mom sees them together again, Mom is going to run. She's going to think it's happening all over again, and this time she'll take us with her, and we will never see Dad again." "So we stop her from getting close to Dad," Phoenix said. "We do more than that." Sage tapped the whiteboard. "We expose her. We make sure Mom sees and actually accepts the truth. Not just reads it in a letter, but sees it happen. We catch Elena doing what she does, and we make sure Mom is there to see it." "How?" Luna asked, pencil moving across the page. Sage smiled. It was the kind of smile that made teachers nervous. "Elena thinks she's the smartest person in any room. She's used to manipulating adults. She has no idea what she's dealing with." "Us," Phoenix said, and for the first time in weeks, he sounded genuinely excited about something. "Us," Sage confirmed. The first trap was Luna's. It was subtle, which was unusual for Luna's smarks, whose emotional manipulations tended toward the dramatic, but this one was quiet, precise, almost surgical. Elena had found Jae-sung's office, Vanta Systems headquarters in South Lake Union, and had shown up at the reception's desk with a story about being an old business associate who needed to speak with him urgently. The receptionist, charmed and flustered by the beautiful blonde woman with the confident smile, had called up to Jae-sung's office. He'd agreed to see her because he didn't know she was there, because he hadn't seen her in 11 years, because he thought it was just business. Luna knew about the meeting because Phoenix had hacked into the building's visitor log. He did not consider this hacking. He considered it accessing publicly accessible administrative systems through non-standard entry points, which was technically different and also still hacking. So Luna did what Luna did best. She painted.
She painted a picture, a small one, delicate, watercolors on heavy paper, of a woman at a restaurant table with a man whose face she left deliberately blurred. The woman was blonde. She was leaning in close. Her hand was on his.
It looked exactly like what Amara had seen 11 years ago in that restaurant. It looked exactly like what Elena wanted to make happen again. Luna left the painting on the kitchen table that evening, propped up against the fruit bowl, where Amara would see it first thing in the morning, with a small note underneath in Luna's careful handwriting. "Mom, I painted this for art class. It's called Things That Aren't What They Seem. My teacher says art should make people think. What do you think it means?" It was a gamble, a big one. If Amara saw the painting and panicked, if she jumped to conclusions the way she had 11 years ago, it could make everything worse. But Luna had thought about this carefully, had talked it through with her siblings for an hour, and they'd agreed. The painting wasn't meant to frighten Amara. It was meant to make her pay attention, to make her start asking questions, because the next part of the plan required Amara to be watching. The second trap was Phoenix's, and it was the one that actually caught Elena. Phoenix had spent 3 days setting it up. He'd created a fake social media profile, a woman named Sarah, who was supposedly a mutual friend of both Jae-song and Elena, and had used it to message Elena, suggesting that they meet at a coffee shop near the townhouse to catch up and talk about old times. Elena, who was vain enough and lonely enough to agree to meet a stranger who flattered her, showed up at the coffee shop on Thursday afternoon. What she didn't know was that Phoenix had set up a camera.
It wasn't a big camera. It was barely visible. A tiny device tucked into Phoenix's backpack, which Phoenix had left on the counter at the coffee shop that morning under the pretense of forgetting it when he and his sisters had stopped by for hot chocolate. The camera was pointed directly at the table where Elena was sitting. Phoenix watched the feed from his laptop at home, narrating everything to his sisters in real time through a group text. "She's ordering a latte," he reported. "She's checking her phone. She's... Oh, this is good." "What?" Sage typed back. "She's calling someone, putting it on speaker. Listen." Phoenix had audio too. He'd planned for audio. Elena's voice came through the tiny speaker, clear and bright and completely unguarded because she thought she was alone. "Yes, I'm in Seattle. I saw the article about the collapse. Jae-song is playing daddy now. Can you believe it? If I can get him alone for 5 minutes, this whole thing falls apart. Amara will see what she always sees, and then she'll disappear again, and Jae-song will come back to..." Phoenix stopped the recording. He didn't need more than that. He forwarded it to Sage. Sage forwarded it to Luna. Luna forwarded it to no one because Luna had a better idea. The third trap was the one that changed everything, and it was all three of them working together. Sage arranged it. Luna painted it. Phoenix recorded it. On Saturday morning, Sage told both parents that she had a school presentation that required an audience and that both of them absolutely had to be there in the living room at 10 a.m., no exceptions. She was very firm about this. She used her CEO voice.
At 10 a.m. exactly, Amara and Jae-song sat on the couch side by side, not touching, but close. And Sage stood in front of them with a laptop and a projector that Phoenix had borrowed from his school's AV room without technically asking permission. "This presentation," Sage said, "is called The Truth. It's about something that happened 11 years ago that affected our whole family, and I think it's time everyone heard it." Amara went rigid. "Sage, please, Mom," Sage said, and her voice was gentle now, not businesslike at all. "Just watch, please." Sage pressed play. On the screen appeared Elena's confession letter, photographed clearly, every word readable. Phoenix had scanned it and cleaned up the image. Luna had painted a small illustration beside it, the restaurant scene, exactly as Elena had described it in the letter, showing the staged setup, the fake photos, the trap. And then, after the letter, came the audio recording. Elena's own voice, casual and calculating, talking about how she planned to do it again, how she planned to make Amara see the same thing, how she was in Seattle right now, today, to finish what she started 11 years ago. The living room was completely silent when it ended. Amara stared at the screen. Her face had gone through something enormous, something that started as shock and moved through anger and grief and landed, finally, on something that looked like release,
like a fist that had been clenched for 11 years, slowly, painfully opening. She turned to look at Jae-sung. He was watching her, not the screen. He had always been watching her. You didn't know, Amara said. It wasn't a question. I didn't know. Not that night, not until 2 months later when she confessed. And by then you were gone and I couldn't find you and His voice broke. I spent 11 years trying to tell you. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, Amara, for all of it. For not seeing what she was doing, for not protecting you from it. For saying things that night that made you believe it was true.
Amara pressed both hands over her face. Her shoulders shook. And then Luna was there, climbing up onto the couch and putting her small arms around her mother's shoulders, and Sage was on her other side, and Phoenix was behind the couch with one hand resting on Amara's hair, and the three of them held her, while 11 years of pain moved through her body and out. "Mom," Luna whispered, "it's okay. We're here. And so's he. And Daddy is not going anywhere." Amara lowered her hands. Her eyes were red. Her face was wet, but something in her expression had shifted, something fundamental, something tectonic. She looked at Jae-sung again, and this time there was no glass wall between them. "The kids did this?" she asked, gesturing at the laptop. "We did," Sage confirmed proudly. "And we also caught Elena trying to do it again, by the way. Phoenix recorded her at a coffee shop basically confessing to everything, so she's kind of done." "You," Amara blinked. "You caught her? How?" "It's a long story," Phoenix said, "involving a fake social media profile, a hidden camera, and what I would call a masterful piece of social engineering." "You're 10? Amara said faintly. 10 and a half, Phoenix corrected. Despite everything, despite the tears and the weight of 11 years finally lifting, Amara laughed. A real laugh, wet and broken and full of something that sounded dangerously close to hope. She looked at Jae-sung, he looked at her, and for the first time since she'd seen him standing in that hospital doorway, she didn't look away. "I think," Amara said slowly, "that I owe you an apology."
I do. She reached out and took his hand. Just took it. Simple and deliberate. The way you did something you'd been wanting to do for a very long time and had finally stopped being afraid of. I ran. I shut you out. I kept our children from you for 10 years because I was too hurt and too proud to ask you what really happened. And I'm sorry. I should have fought harder to find you, Jae-sung said, his voice rough. I should have... You searched for 11 years, Amara interrupted. I think that counts as fighting. They looked at each other, and something settled between them. Not a resolution, exactly, not yet, but a beginning. A door opening after 11 years of being locked. Can I? Jae-sung started. Yes, Amara said, before he could finish the question. He leaned in, she met him halfway, and the kiss was quiet and careful, and tasted like salt from crying and felt like the first breath after being underwater for a very long time. Finally! All three triplets said at the same time. Amara pulled back, laughing. Were you three watching? Obviously, Sage said, arms crossed, grinning. We've been running Operation Parent Trap for 6 weeks. Did you really think we weren't going to watch the finale? You'd named it? Jae-sung asked, incredulous. We have a whiteboard, Luna confirmed, and a timeline, and a group chat. A group chat? Amara repeated. Dad's in it too, Phoenix said casually. He joined last week. Amara turned to look at Jae-sung, who had the decency to look sheepish. They asked me, he said. I couldn't say no.
Amara shook her head, but she was smiling, really smiling, the kind of smile that lit up her whole face and made the room feel warmer. And she looked at her 3 children, her impossible, ridiculous, brilliant children, and felt something click back into place inside her chest that she hadn't even realized was broken. I love you, she said. All 3 of you. So much it's actually kind of scary. We know, Sage said. We love you too. Now, she produced the whiteboard from behind the couch where it had apparently been waiting. Phase 2 of Operation Parent Trap begins now. Dad, you have some planning to do. Planning? Jae-sung looked at the whiteboard. On it, in Sage's precise handwriting, was a single word.
proposal. Oh, he said. Yeah, Sage said. Oh. The engagement happened on Valentine's Day, exactly 1 year after Amara's collapse, and it was, like everything the triplets touched, both completely planned and utterly surprising. Jaisong had arranged an event at Vanta Systems headquarters, a celebration, he called it, of the people who mattered most. The triplets had helped him plan every detail, which meant it was equal parts elegant and chaotic, and absolutely perfect. Luna's paintings hung on the walls, a collection she'd been working on for months, each one a piece of the family's story. The restaurant scene that wasn't what it seemed, the waiting room at 2:47 p.m., the couch on movie night, the kiss on the Saturday morning that changed everything. People stopped in front of them and felt something they couldn't quite name. Phoenix's AI project was set up in a corner, a program he'd built that could analyze patterns in data and predict outcomes. He'd programmed it, as a joke, to calculate the probability of his parents getting back together. The screen read 100%. It had read 100% since the day Phoenix built it.
Sage's business plan for a youth entrepreneurship program was displayed on a presentation board, polished and professional, and 3 different investors had already approached her about funding it. She was handling the conversations with the calm authority of someone twice her age. And then, Jae-sung took the stage. 1 year ago, he said, and the room went quiet, on Valentine's Day, I got a phone call at 2:47 p.m. A little girl named Sage told me that her mother had collapsed and that his number was in her phone with a heart emoji, and that she didn't know who I was, but she called anyway, because sometimes you just have to trust that the heart emoji means something. He looked at the triplets standing at the edge of the stage, and his voice went soft. And then I met 3 kids who changed my life in one night, who sat with me in a hospital waiting room and told me about their mother, about her pancakes and her singing and her terrible villain voices, who trusted a stranger because their mother had, somewhere deep down, trusted him too. He turned to Amara, who was standing in the middle of the room with tears already on her face because she knew what was coming and she didn't care that everyone was watching. Jae-sung knelt. The triplets joined him, Sage on his left, Luna on his right, Phoenix behind them with his hands in his pockets, trying not to cry and failing completely. Amara Okoye, Jae-sung said, pulling out a ring, the same ring from 11 years ago, the one he'd kept on a chain around his neck for a decade, now reset and polished and gleaming. You are the bravest, most beautiful person I have ever known. You raised 3 extraordinary humans by yourself. You survived when I wasn't there, but I'm here now. We're all here now. He glanced at the triplets. Sage nodded, once, sharply. Luna was crying. Phoenix gave a single thumbs up. We're asking, all 4 of us, will you marry us? Yes, Amara said, before he'd finished the sentence. Yes, obviously yes, you ridiculous, beautiful man.
The room erupted. Luna threw her arms around both of them. Phoenix pretended he wasn't crying by announcing loudly that tears are just the body's natural stress response mechanism. Sage stood back and watched it all happen with a satisfied expression and pulled out her phone to update the whiteboard app. Operation Parent Trap complete. She looked at her family, her mother and father, together at last, and her siblings, loud and messy and perfect, and felt something warm and enormous settle in her chest. Some things, it turned out, were worth every single scheme. The wedding was 6 months later, in late summer, in a garden venue overlooking Lake Washington. Sage was maid of honor and took her responsibilities with deadly seriousness, clipboard and all. Luna had painted all the ceremony decorations and designed the invitations. Phoenix had built a small robot to carry the rings down the aisle because he claimed human ring bearers were unreliable and prone to dropping things. They also adopted a 3-legged rescue dog named Chance, who wore a bow tie and walked down the aisle to applause. Just before the kiss, Sage stepped forward, phone in hand. She held it up so everyone could see the screen, Amara's old phone contacts list, the one from a year ago, with Jae-sung heart clearly visible at the top. 1 year ago, Sage said, her voice steady and clear the way it always was when she was in charge. I saw this number on Mom's phone and I had no idea who it was, but Mom kept it for 11 years, with a heart, and I pressed call. She looked at her mother. Best phone call I ever made. Then she looked at Jae-song. "Don't make us regret it." Jae-song laughed, a real full surprised laugh. "I won't, I promise." Sage nodded, satisfied, stepped back to her spot, and the officiant smiled and said, "You may kiss the bride." And when they did, it wasn't just a wedding kiss. It was a thank you to fate, to fear, to a phone call at 2:47 p.m., and to 3 kids who refused to let their parents stay broken. If you made it all the way to the end of this story, if you believe in second chances and emergency contacts that change everything and families finding their way home, leave a comment and tell me what you loved most. Subscribe if you haven't, because there are more stories like this one. Stories about real courage and messy love and happy endings that are earned. Thank you for being here. That night, after the reception, after the triplets had finally gone to bed exhausted from dancing and cake and joy, Amara and Jae-song stood on the balcony of their new house, the one they'd bought together, the fresh start that was big enough for everyone, and looked at the stars. "Do you ever think about the what-ifs?" Amara asked. "What if I deleted your number? What if the kids hadn't called you?" "Every day," Jae-song admitted. "But they did call. You didn't delete it. Some part of you never gave up on us, even when you thought you had." "The emergency contact I never deleted," Amara said softly. "The best decision you ever made," Jae-song replied. "Second best," Amara corrected. "Best decision was saying yes when you proposed. Both times." They stood there in comfortable silence, and inside the house they could hear the sounds of their children sleeping and the soft breathing of a 3-legged dog who'd found his forever home, and it felt like every broken piece had finally found where it belonged. They'd lost 10 years, but they'd gained forever, and in the end, that was more than enough.
K Afro Tales. The weak will become strong one day.